Hey everybody. So it's been a couple of days since the last update, and sorry I've been flaking out on this. I'm gonna try to start doing one chapter a day for real now. Maybe I'll even do two today since it's pretty short chapters, I think. Um, Before I start, I want to say that there's some serious bullying done by a teacher in this chapter. So if it's going to trigger you or if it's going to bring up any bad memories, then I feel that you should probably wait to watch it. Um, because, I mean, I've had bad experiences with school, and it's kind of making me feel a little icky reading it aloud. Um, but it's a good ending. The chapter has a good ending. And I just want to say that it's a pretty short chapter, so hopefully I'll get through it without going over the 15-minute mark. Um, and with that, let's begin chapter 3, Doodle. Miss Schwartz, Candy's history teacher, was not in a pleasant mood at the best of times, but today her mood was fouler than usual. As she went around the classroom returning the project papers on Chickentown, only her few favorite students, who were usually boys, earned anything close to good marks. Everyone else was being criticized. But nothing the rest of the class had faced compared with Mrs. Schwartz's attack on Candy's paper. "Facts, Candy Quackenbush," the woman said, tossing Candy's paper about Henry Murkett's demise down on her desk. "I asked for facts. And what do you give me?" "Those are facts, miss." "Don't answer back," Miss Schwartz snapped. "These are not facts. They are morbid pieces of gossip. Nothing more. This work, like most of your work, is worthless." "But I was in that room at the Comfort Tree Hotel," she said. "I saw Henry Murkett's sextant." "Are you hopelessly gullible," said Schwartz, "or are you just plain stupid? Every hotel has some kind of ridiculous ghost story. Can't you tell the difference between fact and fiction?" "But, Miss Schwartz, I swear these are facts." "You get an F, Candy." "That's not fair," Candy protested. Miss Schwartz's upper lip began to twitch, a sure sign that she was going to start yelling soon. "Don't talk back to me," she said, her volume rising. "If you don't stop indulging in these dim-witted fantasies of yours and start doing some real work, you're going to fail this class completely, and I'll personally see you held back another year for your laziness and your insolence." There was a lot of tittering from the back of the class, where the coven of Candy's enemies, led by Deborah Hackbarth, all sat. Miss Schwartz threw them a silencing look, which worked, but Candy knew they were smiling behind their hands, passing notes back and forth about Candy's humiliation. "Why can't you be normal?" Miss Schwartz said. "Give me work like this from Miss Ruth Ferris." She leafed through the pages. Miss Schwartz held up the paper so that everyone could see what an exemplary piece of work Ruth had done. "You see these graphs?" Miss Schwartz was flicking through the pages of colored graphs Ruth had thoughtfully provided as appendices to her paper. "You know what they're about? Well, do you, Candy?" "Let me guess," said Candy. "Chickens?" "Yes, chickens. Ruth wrote about the #1 industry in our community. Chickens." "Maybe that's because her father is the factory manager," Candy said, throwing the perfect Miss R. Ferris a sour look. She knew, everybody knew, including Miss Schwartz, that Ruth's pretty little charts and flow diagrams, from egg to chicken nugget, had been copied out of her father's glossy brochures for Applebaum's farms. "Who cares about chickens?" Candy said. "Chickens are the lifeblood of this town, Candy Quackenbush. Without chickens, your father wouldn't have a job." "He doesn't have a job, Miss Schwartz," said Deborah. "Oh, well, he likes his beer too much." "All right, that's enough, Deborah," said Miss Schwartz, sensing that things were getting out of hand. "You see how disruptive you are, Candy?" "What did I do?" Candy protested. We waste far too much time on you in class. Far too much. She stopped speaking because her eyes had alighted on Candy's workbook. She snatched it up off the desk. For some reason, Candy had started drawing wavy patterns on the cover of her book a couple of days before, her hands simply making the marks without her mind consciously instructing it to do so. And that's the picture on pages 28 and 29. What is this? Miss Schwartz demanded, flipping through the pages of the workbook. The interior was decorated in the same way as the cover, tightly set lines, hundreds of them, waving up and down all over the page. It's bad enough that you bring these morbid stories of yours into school, Miss Schwartz was saying. Now you're defacing school property? It's just a doodle, Candy said. Good Lord, are you going crazy? There are pages and pages of this rubbish. Miss Schwartz held the workbook at arm's length as though it might infect her. What do you think you're doing? What are these? For some reason, Miss Schwartz stared down at her. Candy thought of Henry Murkett sitting in room 19 on that distant Christmas Eve, waiting for his ship to come in. Thinking of him, she realized what she'd been drawing so obsessively in her workbook. It's the sea, she said quietly. It's the what? Said Miss Schwartz, her voice oozing contempt. It's the sea. I was drawing the sea. Were you indeed? Well, it may look like a sea to you, but it looks like 2 weeks in detention to me. There was a little eruption of laughter from the back of the class. This time Miss Schwartz didn't hush it. She simply tossed the defaced workbook onto Candy's desk. It was a bad throw. Instead of landing neatly in front of the disgraced Candy, it skimmed across the desk and, taking the paper about Henry Murkett, along with several pens, pencils, and a blue plastic ruler, off the other side and onto the floor. The laughter halted. There was a hush while one of the pens rolled to the halt. Then Miss Schwartz said, I want you to pick all that trash up. Candy didn't reply, at least not at first. She remained in her seat, not moving a muscle. Did you hear me, Candy Quackenbush? The Hackbarth clique was in hog heaven. They watched with smirks on their faces as Candy sat in her seat, still refusing to move. Candy? Miss Schwartz. I heard you, Miss Schwartz. Then pick them up. I didn't knock them off the desk, Miss Schwartz. I beg your pardon? I said I didn't knock them off the desk. You did. So I think you should pick them up. All the blood had drained from Miss Schwartz's face. The only color that remained was the purple shadows under her eyes. Get up, she said. Miss Schwartz, you heard me. I said get up. I want you down at the principal's office right now. Candy's heart was beating furiously and her hands were clammy, but she wasn't going to let Miss Schwartz or any of her enemies in class see that she was nervous. She was irritated with herself for letting Miss Schwartz escalate this stupid showdown. Maybe the principal would be more sympathetic to Candy's researches than Miss Schwartz, but Candy doubted that she'd even get to show him her paper. All Miss Schwartz would want to talk about was Candy's insolence. Unfortunately, it was a subject the principal took very seriously. Only a month ago he had talked to the whole school about that very subject. There would be a policy of zero tolerance, he told everyone, toward pupils who were disrespectful to teachers. Any student who crossed the line, he'd said, between civility and rudeness of any kind could expect serious consequences. He had meant what he said. 2 weeks ago he had expelled 2 students for what he called extreme discourtesy toward a teacher. And here we get a view of what Candy was doodling. Candy half wondered if there was still time to apologize, but she knew it was a lost cause. Miss Schwartz wanted to see Candy squirming in front of the principal, and she wasn't going to let anything keep her from witnessing that. "You're still sitting down, Quackenbush," the woman said. "What did I tell you?" "Well?" "Go to the principal's office, Miss Schwartz." "So move your lazy behind." Candy bit her tongue and got up. Her chair made an ugly squeal as she pushed it back. There was more nervous laughter from one or two places around the class, but there was mostly silence, even from the loquacious Deborah Hackbarth. Nobody wanted to draw Miss Schwartz's venomous attention in their direction right now. "And pick up your workbook, Quackenbush," Miss Schwartz said. "I want you to explain your defacing of school property to the principal." Candy didn't argue. She dutifully went down on her haunches and gathered up all the things that Miss Schwartz had knocked off her desk. The pencils, the pens, the workbook, and the paper on Henry Murkett. "Give that stupid paper and the workbook to me," Miss Schwartz said. "I'm not going to destroy them," Candy protested. "Just give them to me," Miss Schwartz demanded, her voice almost cracking with rage. Candy put the pens and pencils down on her desk and gave the book and paper to Miss Schwartz. Then, without looking around at the rest of the class, she made her way to the door. Once she was outside the classroom in the eerie hush of the corridor, she felt a peculiar sense of relief. She knew that she should be feeling full of regret and self-recrimination, but the truth was that a significant part of her was glad that she'd said what she'd said. Miss Schwartz had picked on her one too many times. She was a ridiculous woman anyway, with her endless snide remarks and her ludicrous obsession with chickens. "Who cares about chickens?" Candy said, her voice echoing down the empty passageway. The door at the end of the corridor was open. Through it she could see the sunlit yard, and beyond the yard the school gate and the street. It would be so easy, she thought, just to walk out of here right now and never have to hear Miss Schwartz pontificate on the glories of chicken farming ever again. What was she thinking? She couldn't do that. She'd be expelled for certain. "So what?" said a voice at the back of her head. "Just walk out. Go on. Walk out." For some reason, the doodles she had drawn in her workbook came back into her mind. Only this time, instead of being black lines on gray, recycled paper, they were bright in her mind, very bright, on all kinds of colors, the way the sun appeared in your mind if you looked at it for a moment and then closed your eyes. Dozens of little suns, green and red and gold, then colors, too, that you couldn't even name. That was the way the lines looked in Candy's mind's eye. And they were moving. The waving lines were rolling across the darkness inside her skull, rolling and breaking, the brilliant colors bursting in arabesques of white and silver. Behind her she heard a familiar sound, the click, click, click of Miss Schwartz's heels. "What are you still doing in the corridor, Candy Quackenbush?" she yelled down the corridor. "I told you to report to the principal's office." Everyone in the classes along the passage had heard the woman, Candy knew. Tomorrow she'd be the butt of every idiotic joke. Candy glanced down her shoulder. Miss Schwartz's was gaining on her, her arms crossed in front of her bosom. Held captive behind them was the evidence for the persecution. Candy's workbook and the paper on Henry Murkett. Poor Henry Murkett, sitting in that cold little room in the hotel, waiting with his sextant for a ship to come and find him. Checking the stars, consulting his watch. Waiting and waiting until he could stand the wait no longer. Candy looked away from Miss Schwartz, her gaze returning to the rectangle of brightness at the end of the corridor. And still the lines rolled on in her mind's eye, rolled and broke, rolled and broke. "Where do you think you're going?" Miss Schwartz demanded. Candy's feet knew, even if her brain was a little slow at catching up with the idea. They were taking her out of here. "You head right back to the principal's office," Miss Schwartz called after her. Candy didn't really hear the woman's words very clearly now. The lines in her head were making a sound, like the din of white noise on an untuned television. It washed away Miss Schwartz's demands. "Candy Quackenbush! Come back here!" Her shrill voice was being heard from one end of the school to the other, but the person to whom they were directed at was deaf to them. Out she went with Miss Schwartz pursuing her, inventing new threats and demands to throw in Candy's directions. Candy took no notice of them. She stepped over the threshold and out into the bright morning. A little portion of her mind still said, "Candy, turn around. What are you doing? They'll expel you for certain." But the voice was still too small to convince her feet. At the threshold, she broke into a run. It took her 30 seconds to reach the school gate and get out into the street. A few students caught sight of her as she made her departure. Those who knew her said they'd never seen Candy Quackenbush looking happier. And that is that is the end of chapter 3, Doodles. And if you liked it, if you think I did a good job, clicking the like button would help me out a lot, and so would, telling other people about this. It's nice to know that you're not just shouting into a void. And I think I don't want to go too much longer since I'm already at 16 minutes. So I'll end this video right now and see you next time. Bye. And thank you for watching.